There was a time not too long ago when the quietest hours of the night were also the loudest inside my mind. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the clock and the hum of thoughts that refused to let me drift away. My body was tired, yet my mind wouldn't follow. I tried closing my eyes tighter, shifting positions, fluffing pillows, sipping teas, counting backward from 100, but still, sleep kept its distance. If you've been there, if you've ever stared into the dark and wished for nothing more than to simply fall asleep like you used to, I want you to know, you're not alone. And here's the part I never imagined I'd say. Today at 75, I sleep better than I did in my 50s. Not because of pills or expensive treatments, but thanks to something much simpler, something already in your kitchen. You see, our bodies change as we age, but the answer to many of those changes isn't found in something new. It's found in returning to what nature has always quietly offered us. In my case, it came through 7 humble foods. Nothing exotic or rare, just natural, nourishing, and profoundly gentle. Each of them didn't just fill my stomach, they calmed my mind. They eased my nights. They gave me back something I had begun to believe was lost for good, peace after sunset. I'll tell you about the first change I noticed. It wasn't dramatic, it was subtle. One evening, I ate something sweet and green before bed. Not overly sweet, just enough to feel like a small treat. That night, I fell asleep before I even finished the chapter I was reading, and I stayed asleep. Not just drifting in and out like before, but truly asleep. When I woke, I didn't feel groggy or slow. I felt rested. It had been so long that I had almost forgotten what that even meant. Turns out this small fruit was full of something that helped regulate the rhythm my body had been missing. After that, I became curious. What else had I overlooked? What other natural gifts were waiting patiently on the grocery shelf, ready to heal my restless nights? So I began experimenting, gently, mindfully. I paid attention, not just to what I was eating, but to how I felt in the hours afterward. Was I tense? Was I calm? Did I feel light or heavy? Did I wake often or sleep through? And slowly I began to uncover a pattern, a quiet truth. Certain foods spoke the language of the body's nighttime rhythm. They didn't force sleep, they invited it. There was a deep red juice I sipped for a week and found that I no longer woke up at 3 a.m. staring into the darkness. There was a soft yellow fruit that seemed to melt tension from my shoulders before bed, almost like a quiet exhale. And then there were the small, earthy bites, sometimes crunchy, sometimes brewed, that made my evenings feel like a ritual again. It wasn't about indulgence, it was about presence, about listening, about choosing what I gave my body as the final message before rest. I'm not sharing this to promise a miracle. I know each of us carries different stories in our bodies, but I share it because I believe sleep, especially in our later years, shouldn't feel like a battle. It should feel like a homecoming. And sometimes the door to that restful place opens not with struggle, but with softness, with warmth, with the right kind of nourishment. If you're still here with me, still reading, maybe it's because your nights feel like mine used to. Maybe you too lie awake some evenings, wondering if your best sleep is behind you. If that's the case, I want to gently invite you to keep going with me. Because in just a moment, we'll continue this quiet journey through the small, healing choices that changed my nights. And maybe, just maybe, they'll change yours too. And if you've found even a whisper of comfort in these words so far, I hope you'll consider sharing this message with someone close to you. A friend, a sister, a neighbor, anyone who might also be lying awake at night, wondering if deep sleep is something they'll ever feel again. Sometimes the smallest bit of knowledge can bring the greatest peace, and your kindness in sharing could be exactly what someone else needs tonight. But before we do, I'd love to know, are you still with me? If this is resonating with you so far, just drop a comment below with a simple yes. It lets me know I'm not speaking into the void. It lets me know you're listening, and maybe that this message found its way to exactly where it needed to be. Now, as we move forward, I'll begin to share with you each of these foods, not as a list, but as a moments in my story. Each one came into my life gently, almost quietly, but left behind the most powerful gift of all, the return of restful, soul-deep sleep. And the first of these is something green and fuzzy that you've likely passed by in the market more times than you can count. It was a kiwi. Yes, that small, soft, unassuming fruit with bright green flesh and tiny black seeds. I'd always thought of it as something fancy you add to a fruit salad, not something with real impact. But I was wrong. I started having one, sometimes two after dinner. Not every night, just on the evenings I felt particularly restless. I didn't expect anything, really, but that first night something shifted. I found myself yawning earlier than usual, not from boredom or fatigue, but from a gentle wave of relaxation washing over me. My body felt ready. I later learned that kiwi contains something that helps tell the brain it's time to rest. But what I noticed most wasn't the science, it was the feeling, a kind of soft landing into sleep, like a feather settling onto a pillow. And the longer I kept this habit, the more consistent my sleep became. Less tossing, fewer midnight awakenings. It felt as though this little fruit had become a kind companion, whispering at the edge of night, "You're safe. You can let go now." Encouraged by that experience, I became curious about other quiet helpers. One evening during a phone call with an old friend, I mentioned my kiwi discovery. She paused, then said, "Have you ever tried tart cherry juice?" I hadn't. The next day, I picked up a bottle from the local market. That night, I poured a small glass, cool and rich in color, and drank it slowly as the sky darkened. There was something comforting in its taste, deep, slightly sour, and somehow grounding. The results weren't immediate, but after a few days, I noticed something subtle. I was sleeping through the night without waking at my usual hour, the one where I'd stare at the clock and wonder why my body betrayed me. It felt like a small miracle. Later, I read that cherries contain a compound our brains recognize as a signal for sleep. But again, it wasn't about the science. It was about how I felt, held, supported, unburdened. At this point, I wasn't just trying foods. I was having evening rituals. It became something I looked forward to, a time of quiet, of intention, of gentle nourishment. That's when bananas entered the picture. I've always liked them. Easy to eat, easy to digest. But I'd never thought of them as part of my sleep routine. That changed when I began having one an hour before bed. It's hard to explain, but it seemed to smooth out the edges of the evening. No more sharp restlessness, no more mental pacing. Just a slow winding down, like a song fading into silence. There was one evening I particularly remember. I had been anxious all day, heart heavy with the kind of thoughts that visit us as we grow older. Thoughts of time, of memory, of loved ones no longer near. That night, I made myself a warm drink and sliced a banana into a small bowl of oats. I sat near the window watching the trees sway, the sky bruising into dusk. And for the first time in days, my shoulders softened. My mind grew still. I went to bed and fell asleep with no resistance, no fight, only ease. These small changes didn't feel like medicine. They felt like care, like kindness to myself at the end of each day. And then came the discovery of walnuts. I'll be honest, I'd always thought of them as dry and a little bitter, but someone once told me they're like brain food, so I decided to give them another chance. I toasted them lightly, added a sprinkle of cinnamon, and had a few before bed. To my surprise, they felt grounding, heavy in a good way, like they anchored me back into my body, reminded me it was okay to rest. What I found remarkable was how, when I combined these foods in different ways throughout the week, the results compounded. One night, a banana and a few walnuts. Another night, a kiwi followed by a glass of cherry juice. They weren't strict rules, just gentle options. And slowly, night after night, my body began to trust that rest would come, that I no longer needed to prepare for battle with sleep. If you're still here with me, thank you. It means you're listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. And if something in these stories feels familiar, if you've tried so hard to reclaim your sleep, or if you've started to believe that restful nights belong to a younger version of yourself, I want to gently push back on that thought. I'm 75 and I sleep like a baby. Not every single night, of course. Life still has its worries, but more often than not, I wake feeling whole. And here's something I want to ask you. What's your current nighttime ritual? Do you have one? Is it chaotic or calm? Is it something you look forward to or something you dread? Think about it. Because the food we eat before bed isn't just about nutrients, it's about signals, about telling the body, you're safe now, you can rest. We still have more to explore. There are a few more small, beautiful foods that I haven't mentioned yet, each with its own quiet power to soothe and settle. In the next part, I'll tell you about a warm, golden cup that changed the way I think about bedtime entirely, and later a tiny, crunchy snack that works like a lullaby from nature itself. I hope you'll stay with me. That warm, golden cup I just mentioned, it came to me almost by accident. I had been reading an old book on natural remedies, a well-worn paperback I picked up at a secondhand store. Near the end of one chapter was a simple suggestion: brew chamomile tea before bed, sip slowly, breathe deeply. It sounded almost too quaint, too easy, but something about it stayed with me. So one evening, as the sun was dipping behind the trees and the air carried that gentle coolness of evening, I placed a kettle on the stove, found a packet of chamomile tucked in the back of the cupboard, and let it steep. There was nothing magical in the way it smelled, just a soft floral scent, familiar but not loud. I held the cup in both hands, sitting by the window as the steam curled into the room. I didn't rush. I didn't check the clock. I didn't think about whether or not it would work. I simply allowed the moment to be. And that night, something rare happened. I didn't just fall asleep. I eased into it. My body uncoiled. My mind grew quiet without being forced. The sleep that followed wasn't deep because I was exhausted. It was deep because I was ready. Since then, chamomile tea has become my signal, my soft landing. I don't drink it every night, but when I do, it's not just a beverage. It's a message to my nervous system. You're allowed to let go now. I've come to see that sleep is not something we achieve. It's something we invite. And some nights, we just need a little help opening the door. After discovering that calm in a cup, I began paying even closer attention to how different foods made me feel, not just physically, but emotionally. That's when I revisited almonds. I'd avoided them for years, assuming they were too harsh or too plain. But something told me to give them another try. So I started having a small handful in the evening, not out of hunger, but more like a gesture, a ritual. To my surprise, they felt soothing. Not flashy, not immediate, but steady. The kind of comfort that doesn't announce itself, but shows up consistently. I later found out almonds contain a mineral that helps the body relax its muscles and quiet the mind. But what I noticed more was the effect over time. Nights with almonds were gentler. My body didn't twitch or stir as often. My dreams felt softer, like silk instead of static. And maybe that's the quiet truth about growing older. We begin to appreciate the subtleties, the small shifts, the foods that don't promise miracles but offer consistency. Almonds became that for me. Not just a snack, but a companion to my routine. Something to remind me that even in aging, there are tools to help us feel safe, stable, and cared for. If you're still here, still following along with me, perhaps you've started to reflect on your own evenings. Do you rush through them, hoping exhaustion will drag you into sleep? Or do you approach them with care, like a garden that needs tending before nightfall? I never used to think about it that way, but now I see sleep as a garden, one we plant through our choices each day, and especially each night. There was one more surprise waiting for me on this journey, something humble, comforting, and often overlooked. Oats. You probably think of oatmeal as a breakfast food, right? So did I. But one cool evening, I found myself craving something warm and gentle before bed. I had no sweets in the house, no late-night cravings for cookies or chocolate, just a container of rolled oats in the pantry. So I made a small bowl. I added a splash of warm milk, a few berries from the freezer, and a tiny drizzle of honey. The moment I sat down with it, spoon in hand, I felt something settle inside me. It wasn't just the food, it was the act, the nourishment, the message to myself that I was worth caring for. That night, I slept with ease. Since then, oats have become one of my go-to comforts when my mind feels too busy or when the day has been a little heavier than usual. There's something about their slow digesting nature that gives the body exactly what it needs through the night. A steady hand, a calming touch. And when paired with a few slivered almonds or a dusting of cinnamon, they feel almost ceremonial, like a warm hug before bed. The journey through these 7 foods hasn't just improved my sleep, it's softened my evenings. It's given me back a relationship with rest that I thought I had lost forever. And more than anything, it's reminded me that aging doesn't mean surrendering to discomfort. It means learning new ways to listen, to nourish, and to care for ourselves with grace. I've told you my story piece by piece because I believe stories carry more than facts. They carry truth. And if even one part of this has sparked something in you, an idea, a memory, a feeling of hope, then I'm grateful. Because you deserve to sleep well. You deserve to rest deeply. Not just because it feels good, but because it's your birthright. You've made it this far, and that means something. So if this story has resonated with you, take a moment to leave a comment. Let me know which part spoke to you most, or simply write, "Still here." Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is say, "I see you, I understand." And if you're wondering whether you can really change your nights just by eating a little differently, let me tell you something. You absolutely can. I'm 75. I've lived through restless decades. And now finally I sleep like a baby. Not because of luck, not because of youth, but because I chose to listen to my body's quiet needs. And if I can do it, so can you. There's something sacred about the stillness of night, a quiet the world doesn't always understand. But those of us in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, we know. We've lived through enough sunrises to know that the hours before them matter just as much, maybe even more. Sleep to many feels like a luxury, but it shouldn't be. Not in these years, the golden ones, when rest becomes more than recovery. It becomes renewal. It becomes a gift we give ourselves, not just for our bodies, but for our minds, for our memories, for our peace. I've spoken to so many over the years, friends, neighbors, strangers who write to me, who say the same thing. I can't sleep the way I used to. And in those voices, I hear something more than frustration. I hear grief, the quiet kind, the kind that aches not just for sleep, but for the person we used to be when sleep came easy. The younger version of us, before worry stole the silence, before age crept into our joints, before the house felt just a little too quiet at night. But I'm here to tell you, sleep can return, not as it once was, but in a new form, a deeper, more meaningful one. One that says, I've cared for myself today. I've nourished my body with kindness. I've chosen peace over chaos. And that is what allows us to rest, truly rest. So the next time you stand in your kitchen before bed, open your fridge or your cupboard and ask not just, what do I want to eat, but what does my soul need tonight? Sometimes the answer will be a bowl of oats, sometimes a banana, sometimes just a warm cup in quiet solitude. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. There's no prescription stronger than consistency, no sleeping pill more powerful than self-kindness, and no bedtime routine more restorative than one built from love. Love for the self you are now, love for the body that's carried you through decades, love for the little rituals that bring you back to center. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for letting me into your evening, your space, your thoughts. I hope something I've shared tonight becomes a part of your own story. I hope the next time you close your eyes, it's not with tension, but with trust. Trust that your body is wise, that your rest is possible, that you too can sleep like a baby. And if you know someone else, an old friend, a sibling, a partner, who struggles with their nights the way I once did, share this with them, not as advice, not as instruction, but as an invitation to slow down, to care deeper, to believe again in the healing power of simple, nourishing things. Before you go, I'd love for you to leave a small note in the comments, maybe just one word that describes how you feel after hearing this, or a food you plan to try tonight, or even just a quiet thank you. Every message, every name, every moment you share there becomes part of a greater circle of people like us, who still believe in slowing down, in aging with grace, and in sleeping with peace. Until next time, may your nights be soft, your sleep be deep, and your heart always know you're not alone. Good night.